Welcome and happy Tuesday, everybody. Um, we've got a wonderful guest speaker. This is actually a friend of mine who is very familiar with AmeriCorps. Miss Stacy Oliver is here today. I'll let her give her full introduction. But this is a training that I've actually gotten to see her do with other AmeriCorps members. So I'm excited that she's going to be presenting to y'all today. Please remember to keep your mute buttons on. If you're not speaking, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, and let Stacy know when we have a question. Um, and I'll also keep an eye on the waiting room if we have any more additional attendees join us. But without further ado, if you want to press a little reaction button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, please welcome Stacy Oliver. Yay.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And thanks for having me. So the training I have prepared for you this morning, is called Stress, Burnout, and Resiliency. And so I'm hoping these are going to be some, yeah, just like maybe some new tools or some new ways of understanding stress and burnout, that will kind of help you in your life generally, but also in your AmeriCorps service. It's really exciting to be talking to this program. Lauren and I actually met for the first time through Arizona Serve, which is another AmeriCorps program in the state. Um, and Lauren and I are also coincidentally from Birmingham, Alabama, but met up in Tucson, Arizona. So I love that. Let's see. And I'll tell you a little bit more about who I am in just a second. Um, yes, Lauren and I work together at uh, at Arizona Serve, which is a program of Prescott College. I was the mental health education program manager there. And really, what that means is that I was working with folks who were getting their degree in social work or counseling or psychology or like most of the helping professions, and trying to help them connect like what they were doing, getting their clinical hours with an AmeriCorps position. I'm trying to tie those together. Um, I am currently a licensed associate counselor in the state of Arizona. I'm a certified clinical trauma specialist. Um, and my entire career so far has been in the nonprofit sector. So I started actually as an AmeriCorps member way back in the day, with a housing and homelessness nonprofit. And I've really stayed in that sphere until now, where now I am working for a sort of community mental health center called Cathexis, and we see clients from all over town. And I will share more about that later. Um, I think here I just wanted to mention, if any questions do come up, like Lauren, feel free to stop me. I have kind of a hard time seeing the chat from the presenter view. But yeah, I'm happy to answer questions as they come up. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We've got burnout versus stress, trying to talk through what is that, um, talking about what is the stress response and the window of tolerance, traits of stress-inducing environments, the role of resiliency and building resiliency. And then if we have some time, we'll get into values and strengths. And then I have some resources to share with you if you're interested in this or want some other places to learn more. I'm sure this is a great group. I can already tell. But we've got, yeah, just some group norms and expectations. So with respecting time, this is really just about like, I have packed so much information in here. I've broken out places for you to ask questions. So if a question is coming up for you, feel free to put it in the chat, and also use those question breaks when they come up. Um, Being present, being an active listener when other folks in the group are talking, being thoughtful about stepping up and stepping back when you're sharing, being kind, which is being respectful, supportive, and curious and patient with others. And then when you are communicating, speaking from your own experience. So I'm sure everyone has heard about I statements to some degree. So being sensitive to the experience of others and also avoiding giving advice explicitly. So we're going to start by talking about what is burnout. Um, and I'm kind of wondering, like, really, you can just unmute or let me know in the chat. What is a way that you would define burnout?
Good morning, Stacy. This is Pam Smith, and I would define burnout as being around someone too much and trying to always um, do things at their expectations and um, feeling like you just don't have time for yourself.
Yeah, there's a few components of that that I really like. Thank you, Pam. Um, yeah, so doing things always to another person's expectations might be a part of it for sure. Um, I'm getting the sense that like a feeling that you're bringing up is like the feeling of being like pushed past like what you want or what you are hoping to contribute in a dynamic.
Good morning. This is Rosemary.
Hi, Rosemary.
Burnout, I associate with feeling a feeling of exasperation, probably not so much so not being able to think appropriately.
Yeah, a feeling of exasperation. I like that a lot.
In the chat, we had Susan comment that it's feeling like needing a break, maybe feeling inadequate. And then Anita says, when you reach the point of your giving all you got and no longer being effective.
Beautiful. Yeah. These are really great and I think are really zeroing in on what burnout feels like. Um, I see Victoria is unmuted. Yeah. Oh, you're muted again.
Oh, all right. Okay. Hi. Um, I thought, I don't really know the definition of burnout, but I felt like the word suited when I was trying to get my degree. And I'd gone back to college in my 60s and was trying to get my degree. And I love to read. I've always read all my life from the time I was a little kid, 3 books at a time sometimes, and just, I always loved it. I had to do
Mhm.
so much reading, and I love to write and writing that by the time I got my degree, I just didn't want to see a book. I didn't want to read anything. I mean, I
Hmm.
felt like that for a couple of years. I
Yeah.
just, I felt like I just was done. And so I couldn't go on and take it to the next level. I only got to my bachelor's and I backed out and said, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was my idea of it. I have no idea if it's right or wrong.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to some burnout for sure. Where there is kind of like a feeling tapped out or maxed out on something. Um, I think that's the more that we dive into it, I think that that's going to fit really nicely with our conversation, actually. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
So we've talked, I'm going to give you like a more formal definition in a second, and we've talked about what burnout feels like. What do you feel, what are some ideas coming up about like what's the difference between stress and burnout? And I'm happy to jump into the next part, but yeah, if you have some ideas, I would love to hear them. Okay.
I
This is Ernestine Holloway. I believe stress is like when you are to a point where you're not really accomplishing anything. Seems like you're going around in circles. You just cannot seem to work things out. Burnout to me is when you just say, "Oh, forget this. I've got to leave this alone and try to move to something else." That's what I believe is the difference.
Thank you, Ernestine.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like a little bit of like burnout is a bit more of like an exasperation of like a
Yes.
that's the finish line. That's done.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Anita, I see your hand up.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I think stress is just a part of our everyday life. Anything that we can do, we can have good stress, we can have bad stress. Whereas burnout, that's to me is just a negative thing. It's something where you reach your point where you are totally feel like you have nothing left.
Yeah.
And you need a break. And you may the stress is causing you to continue going on and doing what you feel like you need to do, and you burn out and you're just not then you're feeding on yourself and you're like disappearing. Yourself is disappearing, and you're just this thing just trying to get things done, and it's just not feeling good.
Yeah. Yeah, so Anita, you're bringing in this idea of like stress is a day-to-day experience. It's a more
Right,
like neutral term,
right,
but burnout
it's,
is kind of this culmination.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was beautifully said. Yeah.
In the chat, Susan commented, stress seems more general, doing too much, not enough hours in the day. Also, finances can be stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, so this theme of like stress is kind of on a spectrum, is what I'm hearing across all of these, like from Ernestine, Anita, and Susan. Yeah, absolutely. There is kind of a spectrumy experience to stress. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of people are naming burnout as more of a cumulative experience. And Victoria, I see your hand raised. Oh, but you're muted.
when I feel stress, when I think about it, I think of stress as producing anxiety, a lot of anxiety, and burnout was just dead, flat, done. And that
Okay.
was, I don't know. That's my idea, understanding. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are all like really great conversations. It's also really helpful for me to hear a little bit more about like where the group is on this topic. Um, so I'm gonna dive into our what our working definition together is going to be. So burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion that's brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. So burnout is a cumulative experience. It's characterized by like some ways that you might know that you're experiencing burnout is you're feeling a sense of dread, there's cynicism, anger, irritability, exhaustion, helplessness, overwhelm, and like experiencing less compassion or compassion fatigue. So basically burnout is you have like a prolonged stress period that feels as though it can't really be ameliorated, which I think I was hearing from a lot of you. So it's a stress experience that has been compounded over time and feels like it's unrelievable. So we're going to talk a little bit about like, okay, so what causes burnout? What are some of the things that cause burnout? So we live and work in systems that contribute to burnout. Some of the way that our society is structured, some of the ways that we are incentivized, some of the ways that, um, like organizations really need to function, and especially in the nonprofit sphere where there are low resources, some of these things kind of like lend themselves to employees and AmeriCorps members experiencing burnout. And burnout is also really multifaceted. And when I say that, I mean that it is a combination of like your social situation, your society, and your workplace coming up against the individual experiences and resources that you have. Right. So there are systemic factors that can kind of like, for any one person, there are systemic and environmental factors that can contribute to someone experiencing burnout. And also, whether or not someone experiences burnout is really going to have to do with that person's individual experiences and what kind of support they have, if that makes sense. Um, And really, the cause of burnout, like ultimately, a really short way that we can say it is that the ability to manage stress is surpassed. Burnout happens when we don't have enough resources to manage the stress that is coming on an ongoing basis. Um, it's also caused by environments that will create that prolonged stress response, which we'll get into more of like what are those environments exactly. So first, we're going to start by defining what the stress response, or sorry, I guess it's not first, but one of the first topics we're going to dive into is what exactly the stress response is. And I'm actually going to come at this from a nervous system perspective. So what's going on in your brain and body at a physiological level with the stress response? Um, so a lot of us are taught to think about the mind and body as being separate or severed from each other. And it's true that there are ways that that framing is really helpful. And also, I have this illustration here because, right, the brain is not disconnected from the body, and they actually inform each other quite a bit. So the mind and the body aren't actually separate. They're continuous, one and the same. So they are interacting and they are a part of each other. Your mind would not exist without your body, right? The stress response is a mind-body response to changes in your environment. So this includes changes that happen throughout your body. It includes shifts in emotion and perception. It's something that happens automatically. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about turning your stress response on. It's something that your body just knows to do naturally. It's also a really normal and necessary response. It keeps you alive. So you probably wouldn't be here on the Zoom call today if your stress response wasn't functioning to some degree. Um, uh, when you hear me talk about the stress response as a physical response in your body, um, let's say that something really scary has happened. One of the examples that tends to come up a lot in circles where we're talking about the stress response is the example of a bear or a mountain lion. So if you were to come across um, a bear or a mountain lion outside, let's say you step outside to go get your mail, and there's a mountain lion by your mailbox. What are some of the things that you might notice coming, like happening in your body when you see that mountain lion?
Your eyes get big. You might start breathing fast. Your mouth might be open, ready to scream or run.
Yeah. Yeah, you might be getting ready to run, your breathing might change, your eyes, your ability, yeah, actually your vision will change a little bit. Yeah, your eyes are going to get really big. Yeah, that was great, Anita. What else might happen?
I would say that you would feel a certain rush. I mean, I guess I have to speak for myself. Um, a quick blood rush throughout my body, and something happening in your brain, electrical impulse, and,
Yeah.
and a lot of people scream. I think it would be rendered silent. but that doesn't mean I didn't want to scream. But certainly, if you scream in front of a bear, it's going to look at you. I don't want to be seen by a bear.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the chat, sorry to jump in the chat, Hoop says that you can go into fight or flight mode. And then Susan commented, blood pressure higher, shaking.
Yeah, all absolutely right. All of them are going to fit really nicely into this next part. Um, yeah, Rosemary, there's something I really love about what you brought up too, which is that like people are going to have different responses actually. So like a lot of our physiological reactions are going to be similar, but our strategy whenever we are caught off guard by seeing something like a mountain lion or a bear, um, it can be different. So for one person whose strategy is I'm going to become very still and invisible, another person might be like I'm getting out of here, right? Like and another person's going to be like I'm going to fight it, right? There's all these different strategies for that your body will kind of kick into when you were experiencing the physical stress response. So here is like maybe a fuller list of what's going on when you have the stress response. So we've got this little chart over on the right that has like a nice breakdown. But basically, like you have some structures in your brain that are always scanning for signs of safety or signs of threat. And so when threat is detected, when something scary or upsetting or anger-inducing is kind of clocked by your nervous system, it will send a chain reaction through your body to prepare you to protect yourself or to respond to the situation the way that your body feels is appropriate based on all of the experiences in your life. And so, there's a flood of different hormones that will kind of cascade through your body. Adrenaline and cortisol are the most associated with stress. Your pupils are going to dilate. So Anita's saying that your eyes are going to get bigger. That's one of those things. So you're going to experience like your vision sharpening. Your liver is going to release some more glucose into the bloodstream to make sure that your muscles have a lot of energy to pull from. A lot of people will get really tense. You're going to experience changes in muscle tone. Immune system suppression is really common, especially with like prolonged stress. Uh, some people, if you notice, like when you're really anxious or when you're feeling stressed for a long time, people will have like tummy problems. That's pretty common because the stress response will slow or stop digestion. Right? If we're in the middle of seeing a bear, that's not a great time to have to go to the bathroom. We've got to kind of hold it for a minute. Um, there's also going to be, yeah, so my folks in the chat mentioned some of these. So there's like changes in heart rate and blood pressure. Breathing is going to change a little bit. Sweating might happen. This is to kind of like prepare you to be able to cool yourself off if you need to run. Um, and then one of the most important parts that we're going to talk about is decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Um, this reaction that we're talking about, the stress reaction, is called stress activation of the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So it's a chain reaction that is between these several different structures throughout your body to create these hormonal reactions to stress. So we're going to break down the different parts of the brain. This is like this is a very oversimplified version of it, but I think it's kind of like all we need to really talk about this subject. We're talking about three different major parts. The first is the brainstem, and this is the part that's at the very back of your head, at the base of your skull. And your brainstem is responsible for basic body functions. So it's going to be the thing that controls heart rate, digestion, breathing, most of the things that have to do with your smooth muscle in your body. And this sends the message to the rest of the body from the limbic system when you're stressed. So, sorry. To finish that. So the limbic system is kind of like where it's this blue structure in the middle, and I'll talk a little bit more about it here. Um, and this is where like your threat detection center is sort of located. And so basically, whenever that gets kicked off, it's going to send a message through this brainstem to the rest of your body. It's sort of the pathway between those two things. Um, The limbic system is this blue area in the middle. It's kind of where like the two halves will connect. Um, this is where emotions are stored. It's where your memory is stored, especially really consequential memory, um, trauma can be kind of stored here, but also just like really like important memories that have helped you categorize safety and threat in the world. Um, there's this is the place where kind of like when really strong feelings rise up or when fear rises up, it's what's going to kind of like send messages both to the prefrontal cortex and to the brainstem at the same time. So it's going to kind of like modulate the relationship between those things. And then the cerebral cortex, the prefrontal cortex, is this green part right here. This is the part that's right behind your forehead. Um, And this part is responsible for things like compassion and self-compassion, focused attention, your ability to use judgment or plan, and think about the future is located in this part. And then emotion regulation. So your ability to kind of like clock what your emotions are and decide how you want to express them accordingly. So I love that someone in the chat already got us closer to talking about this, which is fight or flight mode. Um, so when we talk about all of this happening in our brain, we have this place, we have somewhere to go from there, which is to talk about, okay, the stress response has started. I've seen a bear. Um, what are the four responses that I have to that? Your body has kind of these like four different known patterns or strategies for how it will respond to stress. And so we have this, we're going to kind of illustrate this through the idea of the bear. So there's four F's, and there's fight and flight, which are more mobilizing strategies when we are scared or stressed. And then there's fawn and freeze, which are more, um, they're more like paralyzing, or that's a very strong word. They're more like down regulating. So when we talk about fight and flight, these are the ones that people have like heard about the most frequently, I would say. Um, so in the strategy with fight, here's what's happening. The strategy of fight usually comes up for someone who says, I can take the bear on. I can fight that bear. And so this is the impulse to move toward a threat. A lot of the time, so these are just some like words, like this is just a list that helps us know, like, how am I to be able to tell that I am in fight? So, folks who are in fight are going to feel angry. They're going to feel some aggression. There might be a need to like control a situation or control other people, feeling rage, bullying, having outbursts. Irritability and hostility are a good sign that we're in fight. Picking fights, defensiveness, getting critical or judgmental of other people. Those are all a good sign that maybe that we're a little, like at least a little dysregulated in the place of fight. I'm also going to use, I guess, like for clarity, I want to point out the word dysregulation. So dysregulation is me just saying like when I am not feeling um, basically when I'm feeling activated into one of these strategies, right? So I'm not kind of like at my baseline equilibrium, like cool, calm, and collected. The next strategy that we have is flight. And so in this situation, the body says, well, I don't think I can take on the bear. I don't think I can fight the bear, but I probably can run from it. And so flight is going to be moving away from threat rather than toward it, right? And that looks like running away, panicking or having anxiety, having a hard time sitting still. A lot of worrying or perfectionism can be a sign that we're in a flight state. Um, Working excessively, overanalyzing, if you are having a hard time engaging in a conflict or engaging in a conversation and you're deflecting a lot, that might be a sign that you're experiencing flight. Hypervigilance. So hypervigilance is when you are maybe feeling more sensitive to what people around you are saying, or you're feeling really biased or like predisposed to looking for certain kinds of information from people around you. Um, and then avoiding the problem or the person. So these are the more mobilizing ones. These are about moving toward or away from threat. When we get into fawn and freeze, these are kind of like in polyvagal theory, you don't need to know this, but these are kind of like the dorsal vagal reactions or like the break of the nervous system reactions. So the fawn response, this is what happens when the body says, okay, I don't think I can take on the bear. I don't think I can run from the bear either. I think my best option is to keep the bear happy. And so this is going to look like maybe being in a position of like pleading or begging, having a hard time standing up for yourself, avoiding conflict through appeasing, having a higher concern with fitting in, difficulty saying no, passivity, complying despite disagreeing. And then freeze. Um, Freeze is when the body says, I can't fight the bear. I can't run from the bear. I can't interact with the bear to try to keep the bear happy. I think I have to play dead, or I think I have to be invisible. And it is your body's way of like kind of bracing for the worst. So when this strategy kicks on, it is there's a tendency to feel collapsed or paralyzed, spacing out. I can kind of tell when somebody is in a freeze when they're interacting with me if they start saying "I don't know" a lot. So hearing someone having a hard time answering questions or yeah, kind of getting unresponsive, that's a good sign that they might be in a freeze. Feeling the need to give up, feeling detached or numb, feeling excessively sleepy, having a hard time making decisions, confusion and brain fog, isolating from others, and feeling overwhelmed. That's a good sign that we're in a freeze. So, um, I have this I have this GIF of these fainting goats. So what's happening with these fainting goats, right, is that their nervous system they are this like particular kind of goat where like they have this funny thing where their when their nervous system is dysregulated, especially if it's done very suddenly and they're very sensitive, they are going into a freeze response, right? That's what this looks like. They're going completely offline all of a sudden. So your nervous system decides what the bear or the threat is. So on a day-to-day basis, right? Like this becomes like more of a question of like to what degree am I being stressed out? Because your nervous system is ultimately the one that's deciding how threatening something is. So this can be a threat to life, a threat of pain, a threat to your sense of connection or belonging with other people, a threat to your physical safety, your well-being, or your identity or sense of self. All of these things can trigger a stress response. This is based on all of your lived experiences and how your memories are connected. It's automatic and in response to what's happening around you. Um, and people will experience every stress response at some point, more than likely, but you may lean toward more strategy more than others, just based on what your lived experience is and what's been the most successful for you in this life so far. This graphic is a helpful illustration for talking about something called the window of tolerance. So, when we talk about the window of tolerance, most of the time from day to day, we're going to kind of hang out in this window here in the middle where we have this like squiggly line. So, on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be relatively in this window where your mind state and your body state are cool, calm, and collected and connected. So you're in a state where you can learn, you can collaborate with other people, and you're going to fluctuate a little bit in that window. So you might have, right, like someone might cut you off in traffic, and you might be like, "Oof, I didn't like that," right? But you're probably going to stay within this window. Um, when we go outside of the window and we experience dysregulation, this is when we start to have more issues. And when we stay outside of this window for too long, if we are always getting pushed outside of this window, or if we have like a very small window, like some of us are just based on our life experiences, based on how much stress we've been under recently, sometimes our window can shrink a little bit. And so something that we were actually like trying to do over time is to expand our window, right? It gives us a little bit more space. But really something that can be really like helpful in managing stress and responding to stress is getting to know our window of tolerance a little bit better. How do I know when I'm inside of my window? How do I know when I'm outside of it? And I will, to follow up this presentation, I will make sure that Lauren has this handout so that you have it on hand to look at more. And I guess just yeah, like we have everything that was on that previous slide in here. It's got just like some more examples of what freeze and fawn might look like, and then what fight and flight might look like. I think I want to pause for just a second and see if there's any questions about all of this nervous system stuff that we've just talked about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, are there any statistics or anything? I mean, does this affect women more than men, or is it
Hmm.
equal? Do you know?
That's a great question. I know that so something that I don't talk about in this presentation as much, but that's worth mentioning is that like having a prolonged stress response like can lead to chronic illnesses. So it can increase the instances of things like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune illnesses. Um, and there are some of those, right, like do tend to affect women more. I would say that like folks who belong to groups who experience more discrimination or who experience yeah, there is this scientific concept called minority stress, and so there are yeah, there's just like different groups that might, if they are experiencing more stress socially, they can experience yeah, they can sometimes experience higher levels of this. Um, yes, so prolonged stress is associated with increased heart attacks, Sarah. Um, Yeah, and actually I probably should have included that. If we have some time at the end, I'll see if I can dig up my other chart that's helpful. Yep, and stroke. That's right. And right, like something that we talked about when we were going through all the physiological effects of this, right? Like if we're having chronic stress activation of that HPA axis, our stress response is really intended, like we've kind of evolved to be um, creatures who have a stress response to things that happen in the moment. But when the stressor isn't something that is in this moment, it's like over time, or it's like systemic, or it's for years and years and years. Um, our body, it's just like really hard on your system. It's really hard on your body. And so there's actually a research study that some of you may have heard of called the ACEs study or the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And this was a huge study that was done in the 80s, I want to say. It was in the Kaiser Permanente healthcare system, thousands of participants, and they were really looking at the relationship between childhood trauma and health outcomes. And there was a like distinct increase in mortality, chronic illness, for folks who had like the more adverse childhood experiences they had experienced, the more the higher the mortality risk was at earlier and earlier ages. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and so like another thing to think about, right, with this is that when we get outside of our window of tolerance, when we go into when one of our strategies kicks on to either like fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, something that it's a part of each of those is that like the limbic system detects a threat, right? So that's the middle part of your brain. And it says, okay, brainstem, I need you to tell the body to get ready, get ready. And then it tells the prefrontal cortex, that part that's up here, we don't have as much energy for this right now. And so that, like, some of you, if has anybody heard the phrase like I'm seeing red for like getting angry? So that is kind of a reference to what's going on with your prefrontal cortex. So it's this experience where um, when you're feeling really activated, you have less access to the planning part of your brain, the part that does emotion regulation, the part that thinks about the future. Um, yeah, the part that deals with like executive functioning, so getting from point A to point B. And it's not that it's gone. It's just it's just more difficult to access. Oh my God, I love this hope. Yeah. Yeah. I've been hearing this phrase a lot from folks I work with, crashing out. It's a great phrase. I think it's really accurate.
Can you describe what that phrase means for our volunteers who haven't heard that yet?
Sure. Also, I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Okay.
what I seem to understand from the kids is like crashing out is this way of saying like, um, oh man, I'm like losing it. Like I'm kind of like pushed to my limit and I'm responding accordingly. I'm crashing out. Hope, do you have maybe like an alternate definition?
Yeah, I think you're pretty accurate. Like it's their way of, yeah, pretty much saying like, okay, either like that's on my nerves or you're on my nerves and like kind of step back before I like lose it. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it because it is their way of, kind of putting up that stop sign and like, need to take a breath and take a break and then come back and say this whatever needs to be said or done. So I do appreciate that they say it, but I think it's yeah. I'm like, am I allowed to say it as an adult, or is it something that like it's just their age group is allowed to say, and then we all kind of were like, okay, like because I feel
I
like if
love that.
they say it, then they look at me funny, and I'm like, wait, well, what do I get to say if like if you're pushing me too far? Like I need you to take a step back, but yeah. So crashing out, that's the word. That's the word of the day around our house.
I love it. I love it. I endorse everyone being able to say crashing out. I think it's a good phrase. I think it's useful.
Right?
It's very good. Yeah, I'm seeing some folks in the chat mentioning that like people's eyes can change, right? When you're noticing that someone else has entered into fight or flight, you can see changes in their expressions and in their eye contact and the way that their eyes look. Um, Val had a question. So when kids are stressed and their brains aren't developed enough, how do they handle stress? Or are their brains developed and can handle it? Yeah. I do another training that builds off of these concepts a little bit that's about trauma-informed care. And and I'm saying that to say that like there is a portion of it where we do dig more into like what are some of the impacts of stress at different ages and throughout the lifespan. And for kids who experience stress, and especially like extreme stress, so what we're talking about, like traumatic events, there is a disruption to brain development, to cognitive development. Like there are MRI scans that show that there is like a very big difference between the brain of a child who experiences neglect, abuse, um, or like some kind of traumatic incident versus kids who are maybe experiencing like more normal levels of stress. Right, stress is not something that we like being alive is to be stressed out. Like it's just like kind of a part of like the day-to-day experience. And it's like it's actually something that like having some resiliency and having like kind of a semi-regular, like manageable amount of stress is great. Like the stress that where we're in our window of tolerance is fine. But it's when someone is pushed outside of that window of tolerance over and over again, it can actually have like a major impact on kids and their sense of self and their brain development. Um, and also their physical development, actually, it can affect that as well. Um, yeah. Yeah. I see some conversation happening in the chat. Yeah, so I find the kids may shut down, say, I don't know, yawn. Kid may tear up, fidget, is it time for recess, etc. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like sometimes knowing this stuff, the fight, flight, fawn, and freeze, and like what does that look like in other people versus what does it look like in myself? Like if I'm doing therapy with somebody, it's really helpful for me to know that like sometimes someone repeatedly saying, I don't know is not actually a sign that they're not it's not a sign that this person is necessarily disinterested so much as like oh they might be overwhelmed. That's actually what might be going on, right? It's not that this person doesn't want to engage with me, it's that like they're feeling pretty stressed out and like their prefrontal cortex, right, this part isn't totally online, so maybe we need to try like a different strategy or a different approach or give that person a break. um yeah. I love the suggestion for Urban Dictionary. I myself have also used Urban Dictionary. That's a good suggestion, a good resource for slang. Okay. So, has anybody seen the AmeriCorps morale curve before? Yes, Lauren has. Okay. All right. So, the morale curve is what you're looking at on the screen. This is a helpful, um, I think this is like kind of a helpful timeline actually for us to think about in terms of stress. And I remember seeing this for the first time in my first AmeriCorps term of service. So I was like in my very early 20s. And this was introduced to us as this way to understand how you might feel over the course of your service. I've actually found that this is really, really helpful outside of AmeriCorps service. Like there's a very similar like trajectory that happens for most people who are starting something new, whether that's like a new job, a new internship, a new like program. This can be really helpful to consider just generally speaking. But it looks a little bit like this. And so I think for many AmeriCorps programs, they tend to start in like the summer or early fall. And it's what we're looking at as far as like from the y-axis or the part that goes up and down is a measure of morale. So how motivated, how like excited you kind of feel and like the good spirits and energy that you have for the work in front of you. And so the first phase that people experience when they come into the program is pretty high morale. There is it's the arrival phase. There's maybe like some heightened anxiety. There's more motivation, maybe a little bit of apprehension, but like some enthusiasm. And so some people are gonna come in feeling that kind of like higher level. And it's a higher energy, right? By the time we get to, you've been going at it for a few months, you get towards like month 3, some people will experience a pretty intense dip. And not everybody experiences it, for sure, but some people will experience a kind of trough in their morale. This is usually the lowest point. It happens around the 3-month mark. And this is the engagement phase. So this is where someone will experience some depression, a realization of loss, either real or fantasized, and some frustration. I imagine that this is like impacted a little bit by stage of life, and how familiar you are with like the nonprofit sphere and like different social problems that exist. Um, but there's something that I want to point out about like by the time we get to this period, I think that most people have an experience at some point where they've started a job and like they're excited about the new job, right? And then you get into it and it's like, oh, this is really hard. Like, this is really hard. And like, you might have a period of being like, do I want to be here? I don't know if I want to be here. Or just feeling like really stressed out in this way that everything can feel very frustrating. And usually, right, what's happening is that like you are in a period of learning. You're expanding your capacity to kind of like make these different shortcuts and know who do I ask about this thing and like there is a period of time that's like you're adjusting and you don't quite have all the tools and resources yet. So you're going through a period of pretty intense stress for a while and it starts to accumulate and like guess what happens to morale at that point? Right? We hit this trough, we hit this like lower point in the phase. But then we have this like for most people, for a lot of people, there's going to be this like bounce back. And we'll see that we'll come back up above the zero line in the morale. Um, what, when we think about stress, what do you think is happening about the 6 to 7 month mark that's making this line bounce back up?
You may be seeing some positive results. The child may be responding to whatever it is that you're trying to do to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might see some of your work has been paying off, right? That might be something that's happening. I would argue too that once we've hit this low point, this is usually about the time that for a lot of people, they're going to be like, okay, something's not working and I need some support. So, what's happening between month 3 and month 6 is that like your knowledge starts to accumulate, you start to build up more tools and resources to support yourself. Like this escalation, this like move out of this trough is about having more support is what it is. Having more shortcuts, having more, and when I say shortcuts, I mean like mental shortcuts. Like you don't have to think through like 10 steps to accomplish a task anymore. It's kind of automatic. And so what you're seeing, right, is that like this, when we first started our conversation, we talked about burnout being the experience of being so stressed out that like it's surpassed your ability to cope over time. So that's what this is. It's this dip. And then what's happening up here is like, oh, my resources actually have made it so that either my window of tolerance is bigger or I have more tools for managing my stress than I did before. By the time we get to around 9 months, there's this acceptance phase. This is usually about the time when people feel there's more anger or criticism. There's activism, speaking out, reassessment. This is really when you get to a point where you're like, okay, I understand more about what's going on in the system that I'm in now. And I also know how change is possible and how change is maybe not possible. And then by the year mark or like towards the end, there's a reentry period. And so morale may dip a tiny bit. And usually this is about like, um, yeah, maybe feeling sad about leaving, maybe feeling sad about this thing coming to a close, while also feeling like you're really thinking about like what's coming next, what's the next step. There might be some satisfaction at completing your service, and then really just being like future oriented is at this point. So, just as kind of like a recap, bigger stress responses in your body can mean having more trouble with decision making, collaboration, and thinking clearly. Most days you're going to experience changes in your window of tolerance, but you'll kind of return to like a normal baseline. Your stress response is adaptable and typically is going to fall into those four F's. And lastly, life without stress isn't possible or desirable. But being in your window and being flexible in it is what we're looking for, the adaptability. Okay, I wanted to take another question break. Let's see if anything's coming up.
I wanted to say that um, when a person, well, I know for me, when I feel like I'm reaching that burnout, when I do more self-care. I take breaks away. I might, you know, do things to be good to myself.
Stace, you're muted.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I love that, Anita. When we hit this lower level of morale, right? Like, not everyone will experience this, but if we know that this might happen, if we can anticipate that, like, hey, a lot of people will go through a phase like this, then we kind of know to look out for it, right? And we can respond with support and we can respond with like tools to help us through it. Thanks, Anita. Any other questions for right now?
I was just going to make the comment that when I was younger, my dad told me about the 7 year itch, but I never heard about the 30-month itch or the 3 month itch. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, especially with all of our volunteers being so amazing and us being like a family and a team that we really, when we have new volunteers, that we know like right around that marker, we really need to be supporting them and that that peer support from our volunteers is going to be huge. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that hope. Yeah, and I think like you're speaking to something, right? Like I've definitely seen I have seen this pattern in other places and also maybe with other timelines. So it's like, I think that this kind of, we can look at this as being like applicable to more than one thing, right? So there might be a way that someone experiences this on a smaller scale at like the 3 month to 12 month mark. And then sometimes like for bigger projects or like like more protracted amounts of time, we'll see it on a different scale. Like the 7 year itch that you were mentioning. Yeah, I love that. If there's no other questions or thoughts for right now, I'm gonna hop into um what's probably gonna be our last section, I think. Okay. Okay. So I do a lot of education about tr toxic stress or traumatic stress. And so traumatic stress is really going to be right, like things, it is the kind of stress that like is always going to be pushing someone outside of their window of tolerance. So when you hear me say that there are maybe some traits associated with toxic stress. I'm going to show you what those are. I love this acronym. I came up with it. And it's hiccup. This is a good way to think, just to think about, like what are the signs in an environment that might be stressing someone out, that might be stressing me out. And so if we know what the signs of an environment that would cause this are, that way we can kind of alleviate them, especially when we're serving other people. But also it helps us identify like maybe what's going on. So environmental traits are going to be there's hostility or aggression in the environment, inconsistency, chaos, controlling environments. So, like if there's a lot of micromanaging or surveilling, instability, and then punitive, punishing. So that's either like remove like inadequate reward or like active punishment. So introduction of a punishment. So these are all things in an environment that like might make it so that we don't do so well. So these are just like some different examples of what this might look like in a nonprofit environment in particular, but really any work environment. So a hostile environment, there's bullying, harassment, discrimination, divisive workplace culture, feeling unsafe emotionally or physically. Inconsistent is false urgency, unfair treatment, infrequent or poor communication. Controlling involves like micromanagement, or even having like you have like little to no control over your work or the ability to problem solve. Chaos is unclear expectations, constant change, irregular work or break schedules. Instability is being in a situation where you have to fear the loss of your job or feeling insufficient support or seeing high turnover. And then punishing is that absence of reward. So feeling undervalued or unrecognized, low pay, feeling isolated, no opportunities, or it's direct punishment. So low tolerance or punitive action for understandable mistakes. And then a lack of like rewarding experiences. So if we know these different things that can make it an environment more likely to stress us out and more likely to stress us out in a way that we can't really cope with it, building resiliency is an answer to this. Building resiliency is also an answer to traumatic stress. So this is how we kind of like mitigate the effects of long-term stress or really intense stress. Um, and so all of these things that are a part of building resiliency are will actually activate the part of our nervous system that has to be engaged for us to experience what's called rest and digest. So there's two components to this, two major components, and those are things that bring us safety, signs of safety, and things that make us feel pleasure. So with safety, we're talking about what helps you to feel secure in yourself and your abilities, to feel secure and safe with others, and then in meeting your basic needs. And then pleasure, so like what feels nourishing or pleasurable for the body, mind, and spirit, and what fosters connection and mutual respect with others. So here's like a very basic list of like what building resiliency can look like. So it's connecting with trusted others. It's building self-knowledge, so getting to know yourself more. Building confidence and capacity for managing stress. So knowing how to use your strengths to problem solve. Practicing self-compassion, engaging in community, whether that's like your faith or spirituality, activism, support groups, recreational groups, friends. Prioritizing meeting your basic needs is actually really foundational, and that's actually connection is in humans is shown to be like a primary need more than like a secondary need, is a more accurate way of looking at it. So it's as connection is as important as food, shelter, and sleep. And then movement, some kind of movement that you enjoy. And then, yeah, the last two are expanding support and resources, and then engaging in creative and spiritual activities. So things that engage you in your values, your purpose, or your self-expression. Um, so something that I'm gonna send out, oh my God, there's Rory. Hi,
You want to take a
Rory.
baby break for a second?
Yeah, let's take a baby break.
You say hi. So we were upset.
Oh, hi. Oh, sweet girl.
Sorry.
He
Sorry for
has
the
to be
distraction.
the cutest.
Needed it.
Oh,
You say hi. We just woke up from a nap.
oh. See, you're
Amazing.
already lowering my stress now.
Here we go.
Doing her service.
He is growing so fast.
She
Isn't she
is
gotten
growing
so
so
big?
fast.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
You say hi. Can you wave? Hi.
Thank you.
Baby girl.
Just forget about it. There it
Oh,
is.
there it
Hi.
is. Oh.
All right. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, Stacy.
No, I think that was great. I think we maybe needed like a little refresher, a little pick me up.
Yes.
Mama Nini.
Sweet baby. So this is a tool that I will share with Lauren for afterwards. But I'm going to kind of talk you through like what to expect when you look at it. And so I'm going to share a mini wellness toolkit with you. It's like a one-page front and back document, and it's got three parts. And so the first part is a self-assessment, so assessing your wellness. The second part is like thinking about and thinking through how to name your strengths. And then the third part is basically creating like a resourcing menu for yourself. Um, and so the idea is that like in times of stress, you can support yourself by having a plan. And so the idea is like when I'm really stressed out, I need to go easy on my prefrontal cortex or this part of my brain. I need to like support myself where that's maybe not as accessible to me. So if I have a menu, a document that I can kind of come back to and remind myself, what are the signs that like um, I'm doing well. What are the resources that I know will make me feel better? Sometimes that can actually be really helpful because I think like for a lot of people when they get kind of out of their window of tolerance and they can't think as clearly, there's kind of this forgetting of like, oh, I need to tap into my resources. Oh, and I know what those are, right? Um, so in the assessing wellness part, um, there are questions like describing this is what I'm like when I'm well. These are the things I need to avoid to stay well. These are the signs that I need more help or support. And this is what I need to do for myself every day to keep myself feeling as well as possible. In the naming your strengths part, you will think about these are the things I know support my wellness. This is what works for me. These are my personal strengths or skills. This is what gives me meaning or is important for me. This is what inspires me and reminds me of my values. And with each of these, you're going to want to give like a really like as brief an answer as possible. So something that like really gets to the quick of what you're trying to say. When you get to the resourcing section, I would say this is the most like practical part of the document. What are the people, places, media, or activities that make you feel safe, put you in a creative or playful headspace, make you feel loved or connected to others, make you feel confident or more connected to yourself, or make you feel more energized. And you kind of just want to choose like one or two, like or really like two to three like bullet points for each one. And then finally, there is a section for a stress meal menu and a stress movement menu. And so this is really like thinking about, okay, when I'm stressed out, I know that like this particular basic living task gets harder for me to do. So for some people, um, like it can be like, oh, I don't do my physical activity as much as usual. That's like kind of the first thing to go. Right. So what I might do is I'll think about like, okay, what is like enjoyable movement that is accessible to me that is not for, it's not for the sake of like, exercise and sort of like uh it's it's more about like right like getting a daily walk, getting like a 10-minute walk or just like some sunshine in the morning. That might be the thing that helps me stay well, and it is the easiest possible thing for me to do. And for some people maybe even that is too much, like going outside in the morning might be too much, if someone's like really not feeling good. So it would be thinking about like what is the lowest stakes thing that helps me meet this need for movement that I know I enjoy and I know is easy for me to get to do. And then similar with meals. So, for example, I know that when I'm in really high periods of stress, when I was in grad school, I like I couldn't really deal with thinking about how to cook. I had to lean on my partner quite a bit, but like cooking became awful to me. I hated it. And then yeah, like having a stress meal menu was actually really helpful for me because it was this reminder of like, okay, here I have made myself a little bank of meal ideas that I know are relatively easy. I don't have to think about it, and my body tends to feel pretty good after I have it, right? Like it's sustaining for me. So sometimes having this kind of yeah, these kinds of resources laid out for you ahead of time can be really helpful for managing stress. And then, yeah, just kind of this might be something that would be fun to work on with fellow AmeriCorps members or work on with someone else in your life. And kind of thinking through like swapping ideas with other people about like, yeah, what's something new you want to try? What's something you would feel excited to think about trying out? I will share this out in the email to Lauren as well. This is I specifically do somatic counseling with folks, and so this is very like body-based, nervous system based counseling. This acronym SCOPE is something to respond to like crisis, like it's to respond to like a really intense stress response in the moment. This can help with getting regulated again. Um, and so it's got a couple of different exercises on here as well. And a lot of these have to do with really being able to slow down and get the nervous system like kind of back to like within your window. I will say that for moments of really intense dysregulation, focusing on the five senses versus internal sensations can be really helpful. So for folks who struggle with meditation or mindfulness, I have good news for you. There's like maybe another way to do it that might feel a little bit better, which is like grounding into your environment rather than scanning around internally. And then the other thing that I want to mention here, specifically for crisis or situations where you are flooded, like you have gone into fight or flight, fawn or freeze, um, some things to respond to yourself and the needs that you have in that moment is you might want to consider what's called upregulation versus downregulation. So if we're talking about our window of tolerance again, and I'm down here underneath the lower limit of my window, maybe I don't need to chill out more, right? If I'm in a freeze state, maybe I don't need to do some deep breathing and take a nap. Like you can, but if I'm in an emergency situation, I'm gonna want to try to focus on things that are gonna help me. Like maybe that's gonna be shaking my hands out. Maybe that's gonna be going for a walk. I want to try to focus on things that bring my energy up rather than collapse me a little bit more. And then same thing with like if I'm in fight or flight, that might be a really great time to do some like really deep breathing and slowing things down and getting myself back to baseline that way. Okay, we're getting towards the end. Um, I have a quiz for you. So this first one is which part of your brain can be harder to access when you are stressed?
You want us to do it on the chat?
Yeah, shout it. Yeah, sorry. And thank you. Shout it out or put it in the chat.
Oh, I say C.
C. Yeah, that's right. It's C. The goal of knowing about your stress response is to make sure you never, ever experience stress. True or false? Deborah
Oh,
Shiz says no.
false. False.
False. Yep, you got it. What are the four F's, the types of stress responses?
C.
C. Seeing C?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
to flight, fight, um, what's the other two?
Fawn and freeze. Fight,
Yes.
flight, fawn, and freeze.
Yes.
Leeway.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And then our last one is if you could just throw out three ways to build resiliency and manage stress. We've got take a walk. So we've got movement, meeting some basic needs. Very good.
Exercise.
Yep.
Connect with others.
Beautiful. Yes. Connection. Connection is super
Creativity.
important for managing stress. I'm sorry, Susan, what did you say?
Um, engage in some arts and crafts.
Yes. Yeah, some self-expression, art.
Yeah. Take
I
break.
also I also think you should never lose your sense of humor. If you can go into things with a little bit of humor, I think that helps too.
I think that's beautiful, Deborah. Yes. I actually think yeah, I think there's a way that it fits into some of those other categories, but maybe it deserves to be mentioned on its own. Yeah, a sense of humor is really important.
I
Beautiful.
like to do puzzles or listen to music, dance, and self-care, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-care, sunlight. I'm seeing pray, walk, call someone to talk to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So connection, connecting to our sense of purpose, connecting spiritually, taking care of our basic needs. Yeah, like all of that is beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, we've got self-knowledge also is one of those that's in there. And then building some confidence around your ability to manage stress. So, right, part of self-knowledge is like, how do I know when I'm out of my window? How do I know when I'm in my window? How do I know what I need? What about my past experiences shapes how I'm entering into the current situation? How can I tell the difference between myself and other, right? All of that is very helpful. Okay. If you are curious about the concept of burnout, I highly recommend this book. It's just called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by the Nagoski sisters. Very accessible read. And they definitely dive into a lot of the nervous system stuff that we were talking about today. So if you're curious about approaching it from that perspective, really, really great book. I highly recommend. If you are curious about, yeah, just more articles and like some different tools that are maybe like in shorter form than a book, Psychology Today has a really great burnout basics page. So they've got like a self-assessment, they've got common questions about burnout, types of burnout, resources for finding a therapist. When I say types of burnout, right, like there's burnout from work. Caregivers tend to experience some burnout at some point. So parents and folks who are taking care of others who are sick for a long time. There's resources for finding a therapist in the community. And then there's also articles on helpful topics like how do I reframe burnout or what are some different ways to think about burnout? Cathexis is the name of the practice that I work for. So I do therapy in the community with different folks. And there's also a bunch of other clinicians who are very lovely people, very, very good at what they do at Cathexis. And so we offer in-person and telehealth therapy. We accept some access plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, and some other insurances. And there's a bunch of different therapy spaces to choose from within that practice. So if you are curious about seeking therapy or know someone who might really benefit from a little bit more support, This is a local resource that's available to you, but also Psychology Today is a great resource as well for finding folks who are either in your area or accept telehealth and your insurance, and you can read more about them and what they do. So Sarah, I will recommend um, recommend Psychology Today as a good place to look. Um, yeah, and that's it. That's it for me. I would really love any feedback that you have about this presentation, if it was helpful for you, if there are things that you would like to see changed. I feel like I'm always trying to tweak this to, yeah, be a better experience for people. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for participating. I really enjoyed being with this group. I'm always happy to connect with Lauren. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions, but that's about all I've got. Yeah.